Okay, so dear ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 60th GLC webinar, Translating Technical Frameworks into Actionable Learning. So today is May 28th, and we're here to talk about how to transfer, how to translate those complex technical frameworks into something more actionable, something more digestible. Okay. So this webinar is brought to you by the IFC Growing Connect program, which is implemented with support from the government of Luxembourg. And of course, we're extremely grateful to our master trainers and other presenters who continue to invest their time, their energy, their knowledge to help us all grow as learning and development professionals. So thank you so much, Jonathan, for doing this today. As always, before we begin, I must remind everyone that this session is being recorded and I already started the recording. If you would like to watch any of our previous sessions, you can do that by visiting the Growline Connect platform, or you can simply scan the QR code that you currently see on the screen. It will take you to the previous webinars. Of course, as always, we would love you to join our discussion. So if you would like to say something, please raise your hand virtually and we will unmute you. But if you don't feel like talking so much, you can simply send a message in chat. So please use the option everyone so that everyone can see what you are typing. Now, just a few quick announcements before we actually start the webinar itself. I already mentioned that June 1st is the deadline for those of you who would like to become IFC master trainers in facilitating learning. So if you're considering becoming a master trainer, you still have a couple of days left. We will be accepting the documents and applications before June 1st included. And let me know if you have any questions, but essentially you can, again, scan the QR code that you see on the screen and you will be taken to the Growline Connect page with all information about how to become a master trainer and all the milestones in the process. A couple more announcements. So I know that not everyone who is here today is a trainer. So if you're considering becoming a trainer and getting certified as a trainer, our master trainer, Sandra Ikeolumba, will be offering the Facilitating Learning online and in-person session starting June 2nd. She will be holding 8 sessions all together, starting June 2nd until June 3rd. And from what I know, she already included the price of certification in the total price, in the tuition fee. Okay. So if you're interested, please go to Growline Connect section events, or you can simply scan the QR code that you can see on the screen. We have lots of webinars lined up for you. Not every single webinar has been scheduled yet, but those that have been scheduled include the who signed off on this, how stakeholder non-involvement destroys training impact. So this webinar is already scheduled for August 20th, and we invite you to sign up today. The next webinar that has already been scheduled is called We Train Them. So why isn't it working? So basically those two webinars focus on effective training transfer. If it's something of interest to you, again, please consider joining us on October 8th. Related to this, Sandra Hinacho, she's our master trainer, is conducting a conference, obviously together with a team of other trainers. The conference is called Training Transfer Effectiveness Conference. So this conference is scheduled for November 12th and 13th. It will be held in the hybrid mode, meaning that those of you who live in Nigeria or who can travel to Nigeria can attend it in person. But if you cannot attend it in person, you can always join online. So again, this conference will focus on the effective training transfer. Another conference that you cannot miss is the L&D Africa conference, scheduled for October 21st through 23rd. just as the other conference, this one will be held both offline and online. So if you are in South Africa or live somewhere nearby, you can attend it in person. If not, there is an option for you to join this conference online. And a couple of announcements from our partner, the Learning and Performance Institute. So every single year, the Learning and Performance Institute is holding the Learning Awards competition, so to say. So they invite both individuals, teams, and organizations to upload to showcase the outstanding work that you guys are doing. There are different nominations, different categories. So you can apply in the organization and culture nomination, programs and solutions, innovation technology, and so on and so forth. So we know that you're already doing a lot. You're creating impact as is. So this will open an opportunity for you to showcase what you're doing to the rest of the world. So if you're interested, please consider applying or nominating your colleagues. Okay. And finally, the LPI, again, the partner, the Learning and Performance Institute, is offering the 30% discount on the LPI membership, which is exclusive for GLC members. So if you would like to explore that opportunity to get, again, international recognition, to gain access to practical solutions, tools, and so on and so forth, please consider joining as an LPI member with a 30% discount. And now it is my great pleasure to welcome back Jonathan. So as you all know, Jonathan is an IFC master trainer. He's also an IFC LPI trainer and assessor. And today I'm very happy to actually welcome him as Dr. Jonathan Ikeolumba, because recently Jonathan received his double doctorate. So a huge shout out to Jonathan. Many of you know that he is also a certified chartered accountant and finance consultant. He has over 20 years of experience in the banking, public sector, and consulting industries. So Jonathan specializes in financial management, business strategy, sustainability, which includes ESG integration, climate change, greenhouse gas accounting, and integrated reporting. So Jonathan has a very long list of accomplishments, but I would like to thank him again for joining us today and for sharing his knowledge. So I hope you all enjoy today's webinar. And Jonathan, the floor is yours. I'm going to make you a presenter.
Right. Just to confirm if you can hear me or anybody at all on the call can hear me, that would be perfect.
I can hear you well, Jonathan. I hope our participants can also hear you well.
Okay,
I see some
perfect.
thumbs up.
All right. Okay. So I think the first thing is just to check that our mics, thanks. I can see a lot of the feedback, just to check that our mics are fine. And then we can get into it. One more time, just to say a very big thank you to the GLC community for also making this happen and giving us the opportunity to speak to some of the things we're quite passionate about. Today, we're going to be talking about something that I think many of us can relate with, and that's the idea around how do we translate technical things into actionable learning, I might dare say into memorable learning. So the art of just converting things that we find are technical in a way that is quite very relatable. What I'm hoping we will do with this session will be to basically do four things. I want to be able to help break down technical concepts and framework, the art of breaking it down. So if you find yourself having to deliver on something that is a technical thing, complex to understand really, especially at first glance, how do you break it down for your learners to really understand what you're doing? One of the things, again, I want to share is how do you eliminate what I call information overload, such that you don't find yourself in a situation where there's quite so much you want to compress, especially within a defined time. Also, I want to help make, the learning experiences very, what I'll call applicable, practicable, and much more also to make learning content also very engaging. That's the idea around what we want to do today. And for clarity, we're going to have a very robust structure for how we would learn. So I would run a couple of polls, would pose questions, and please feel free. I was just looking through the attendee list, and I can see quite a couple of trainers as well, even master trainers on the call. So it's really one of those sessions where, I mean, the experiences in the room could also be very helpful as well, too, in terms of, buttressing some of the points I would share. So just in terms of housekeeping, let's use the chat functionality. I'm tracking that, so I'm able to tell who's raising their electronic hand, and we're able to use that to then, put an order to who speaks, and also engage with emoticons. If you want to make a point, or if you want to maybe give some reactions to what we're saying, I mean, it would be good to engage on the emotion icons. That would really help. All right. So this is my reality, and this is one of the reasons why I chose to have this session. Anna did a brilliant job of sort of putting some perspectives as to what I do. For clarity, I only do one thing. I'm a finance trainer, a finance consultant, and recently I completed a double doctorate degree in finance, which also allows me to do finance research. And all of this is really something that I think is quite complex when I speak to people. So much more that a lot of the trainings I do are titled finance for non-finance managers, right? So I do a lot of those kind of trainings. So I think that just being one who's grown over the years to delivering trainings around finance, I find that there's quite a lot in terms of how do I make some of these conversations quite very relatable, especially to non-finance people. But you know what's interesting? When I speak to a lot of people too, it's also the kind of feedback I get. So, for example, I was speaking to a lawyer who was having an issue with breaking down certain aspects of some legal jurisdictions to a couple of people. In Nigeria, where I'm from, we just recently passed a new tax law, and the whole part of the last quarter and the early part of the first quarter for this year, I think I could have done easily over 100 different trainings. And what was very interesting was that I was doing this for people who really didn't understand finance. And so at that point, it just got to me to say, you know what, I think we owe a duty to also make sure that we can also share our expertise on how we're able to deliver on these technical concepts with non-finance people. So I just wanted to say that this training is really from a lived experience, and really the kind of things I've gone through over the last 6 months that I really wanted to share. So we're going to get into it. And first of all, I wanted to pose a question just to gauge the sentiments in the room. If you've ever had the opportunity to deliver on a technical training or a technical topic, given your industry, and I know that there's a diverse industry represented here, how do you do such a thing? I just wanted to get a sense of how you mostly have reacted to this, where you wanted to deliver on something that you felt the audience didn't quite have the same kind of understanding like you did. So I use the term technical topic or technical framework, but the bigger picture is engaging on a topic where your audience doesn't really understand what it is, even from the first glance. So it would just be nice to get a sense, and I'm very happy to just do an open mic on this one. Just give me a sense of how that felt for you, how you were able to deliver on a session like that, a training where you were having to deliver on something that your audience never understood what it was about from the first glance or from the word go. So who is happy to share their experience with me? Um, and is it possible for them to unmute and speak? I think things like this is best if they
Right.
can express themselves.
Our participants will need to raise their hand sort of
Oh, I
virtually so I
see.
can
I
unmute
see.
them, but I see already some comments in chat.
Okay. 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 Let's see what the chat is saying then. I think that could help. But if you want to speak, you could do the raising of your electronic hand. I see Pelumi is making a point. I had to understand what they already know, the environment and the background. So I think what I'm hearing Pelumi say is she had to do some sort of profiling in terms of understanding what their background is. All right. Could there be another perspective? It would just be nice to know what the room feels around this topic, because I hear this a lot, and I think it's just nice to know what the room thinks. Could there be any view again that I've not covered in terms of what's on the chat? Nenaya says, I break down the concept to something they're quite familiar with. Nenaya says, I use a lot of storytelling. All right, very cool. Could there be any other response again that I haven't covered? Obalulua says, I start from the known to the unknown. All right, then Pato says, I first hear from them what the understanding of the topic is. All right, so what I'm saying, okay, Rahid says, I usually start with an example and I walk through them to build the technical concept. All right, fantastic. I think what I'm seeing here, Funto says, I use examples that he can relate with. I think what I'm getting here is this is not something that's quite strange to us, right? And I think it also reconfirms why I wanted to have a session like this, because I think many of us sometimes can find that out, right? So even as I was approaching this webinar, I just received an email from the university where I teach around facilitating a stakeholder workshop, and the stakeholder workshop would have a diverse group. And I was wondering to myself, there goes the point again, around taking them on one of the latest financial regulations. So that's really the point. And many thanks for everyone who's giving their feedback. And I think that one of what we'll do a lot will really be to open up the conversation at some point to just get in to see how what you do versus what I'm proposing, how it aligns. Let me also say that one of the things I'm also doing is to share an approach that I developed and I came up with, and it also forms a research paper. I also want to use this webinar to sort of also bring that research to light. So I came up with what I call a four-stage approach in terms of how do we, clarify technical concepts to non-technical audiences, really, which this is about. So I call it the DFIA methodology, the DFIA, and I'll be speaking to those words, and that'll form the fulcrum of what my session will be. The first thing I think is to really deconstruct the concept, and a lot of you have represented that. I first breaking it down. I saw someone say from the unknown to the known. Someone says I get a sense of what they want to understand before I get into the technical concept. I think all of what you've said is somewhat very synonymous with what I've shared. So the first thing is to deconstruct it, meaning break it down into very simple, easy terms for them to understand. One of the things, again, I think we do next after we've done that part around the technical side of things is then to filter out the noise, meaning focus on the things they need to know. That's what I mean by filter out the noise. And I'll speak to what your slide should always look like when you're delivering on something technical. So it's interesting. My theory really is that the more you deliver on something technical, the lesser actually your slides should contain in terms of technical depth, right? We'll get into that. The next thing again is to immerse our learners in the application. So if you're going to be delivering on a technical training, my argument is that it also has to be a lot application based. So that's one of such sessions where you get them to do. So there's a lot of doing as you speak. And then the final part is to anchor the message. So this is a four-stage framework. Like I said, I developed this and I'm trying to build up a theory around this. I also wanted to use this webinar to also reconfirm some of that. So just to give you a graphical illustration as to the four-step flow diagram that I've sort of proposed, or four-step framework I've sort of proposed, whenever you want to deliver on a technical concept, first of all, break down the technical concepts into relatable bits. The next thing is to make sure that your delivery, contains quite a lot of, focuses quite on the core things, and you leave out the information overload in your delivery. So it has to be quite simple. So the more you do a technical delivery, the simpler your slides should be, or your delivery should be. Then also immerse the learner. Make sure that your deliveries are quite application based, action based. And then final thing is make sure that it's quite memorable by making sure that you reverberate the message, you anchor the message as you go through your session. All right, so let's get to the first part of the framework. And I'm going to use a lot of my experience as someone who is in finance. And one of the things I've done quite recently over the last 6 months has been teaching on tax. And if I use the example of teaching on tax, I think it's fair that when we teach tax, especially to non-tax people, business people pay tax. Anyone who, earns an income would have to pay tax. What I find is that they really don't care about what the nitty-gritty really is about the tax laws. All they really want to know is, so what do I have to do? If I was to put it in a very simple form, I think what they want to know when I'm doing my trainings around tax or what the tax law says is, so what do I have to pay, or am I going to pay less? Am I going to pay more? That's really what they want to know. And I think it's the same thing whenever we're doing or delivering a training that is quite technical, right? So I'm going to use this as an example. I think if you start with something very technical in the messaging, so this is a good example. So if you go to our tax laws, a portion of the tax law says, capital allowances should be granted instead of depreciation. I think if you start with a messaging like this, meaning going on the very technical message for starters, I think you've lost them. So what should we do? And I heard someone put on the chat, almost like he saw, what I was trying to speak. I think the idea really is to start from what is unknown and then move to what is known. I think that's the way to approach it. So rather than start with something like that, I think we could ladder it. And I'm going to speak to what I mean by laddering it. So if I use the case of tax, right, and deconstructing, a technical concept like tax, I think the thing is there are three layers that I could sort of come up with. The first layer is I'm teaching on something that is quite statutory. So there's a tax law, and I give an excerpt of what a tax law states, right? But what is important is how do I move away from what the tax law states to then the emphasis of my training being what should I have to do as someone listening to someone talking about tax? Meaning for my audience, I think the messaging for them is how much do I have to pay in terms of taxes? Or am I going to pay less tax, or am I going to pay more tax? So here I'm caught between what the tax law says and getting the messaging to them around how much do you have to pay as tax. And so I think we can funnel it down, right? And that's why I think that a good way to deconstruct a technical concept is to first of all establish that there's a technical nuance or there's a technical term, break it down to say what does that technical term mean, right? And then more importantly, what is in it for the learner. So it's like a three-stage ladder, right? So the technical term sits at the top. Then what does it mean in terms of what's happening? I mean, what's the messaging in the technical term? But what the learner really wants to know is what does it mean for me? And it's the same thing even if you are teaching any technical thing, engineering, if you are teaching law, if you are teaching anything that is quite technical to your audience. I think the thing to keep in at the back of our mind is what does it mean for the learner? And from a learner's perspective. And so what about what I'm sitting down, looking and listening to? So that's the ladder I would sort of use to just speak to how to break it down, right? So I first of all have to understand that what is in front of me is the technical noise or the technical nuance, right? Then I have a duty as the trainer facilitating on it to then ask, what does that mean? So there's a tax law that speaks about, capital allowances rather than depreciation. So what does that mean? And this is where I bring my heart into breaking down the technical nuance. It simply means that any business or any individual that buys an asset, right? When you buy an asset, rather than having to, pay a tax directly on it, there's a capital allowance that is given to you, some sort of tax recovery. And so that is really me meaning asking myself, what does it mean at layer two? At layer one that was the technical term. At layer two is what does it mean, so that I can break it down to the learner in terms of what does that mean for me. Then I then take it now to what does it then mean for the learner. So it simply means for the learner that you must make sure that you comply with whatever the tax authority has said you should do. It must mean that you should ensure that you take that into consideration when you're filing for your taxes. And so I move away from a technical sort of commentary that I find in the tax law that says, section 24 says capital allowances should be granted. And then my messaging then becomes, you know what? You must make sure that you comply with the tax authority's rule around this relief. If you do not add this computation when you're doing your tax filing, you are going to pay more. So there's a difference between that technical jargon that I had in the previous slide to my messaging around you must make sure you claim your costs when you're filing. You must make sure that you apply this when you're filing. And so what I'm simply saying here is the first step when you're delivering on a technical concept is to think about what it means for the learner, and then your messaging should focus on what it means for the learner. And that's the whole point around what I've done. And so I'm simply saying if you ever had to do anything technical, you have a duty to make sure that you break it down from what it is to what it means for the learner. And that's really how it sticks, from the perspective of the learner. So what does it mean? That kind of thinking should reverberate. What does it mean for the learner? So that's the point that I wanted to make. Okay. I don't know if I'm able to get to support around the next slide. So Anna, is it possible to make me I see someone has joined as a co-host, so I'm not able to move my slides again. Is that possible to get
Give
that
me
help?
just a moment.
Okay, that's fine.
Uh-huh.
Okay, yes, now, so I think I have the rights to do so now. Okay. Okay, so what I've simply said is the first step in having to go through technical training is to really think about what it means for the learner, and start by saying, what does the concept say, which is the abstract technical noise or the technical jargon. Then you have a duty to then say, so what does that mean? But much more, and that's where the learning comes in, is to say, what does it mean for the learner? And so I'm moving away from a technical term, having my technical slides or my slides with technical term. Then my messaging is now where it's now getting very interesting to mean, what does it mean for the learner? What does it mean for the learner? And so the point here is technical trainings should be much more about what the learner has to understand from what you are saying, rather than just emphasizing it in the way it is. So you find that as a trainer, you're doing a lot of translation. That's really what you're doing. Each time you're taking on a technical training, you're doing the art of translating from the technical noise or the technical jargon to what it means for the learner. And that's the point that I'm making. So I'm just going to do something now by asking, is this clear? What I've said so far, is this clear? And give me a feedback, maybe a thumbs up or a thumbs down if you don't understand this. So just to get a confirmation that what I've described was well understood around the first law when it comes to delivering on the technical training. Okay, I think a couple of people are making a point. All right. So the big picture is we start. Many thanks. I can see quite a lot of response. So the big picture is, as one who delivers on the technical training, you will be doing a lot of deconstructing. You'll be doing a lot of interpretation. That's the kind of thing you do, right? Clarifying the meaning. And what that really does is that it then prepares the learner for the actual learning experience. So you can think about that stage as setting the tone, and just getting the learner, to be ready for what it is that is about to come true, right? All right. I'm going to run a poll, and I would do it this way. I'm going to run a poll. So I think I'm not able to sort of get that in, but let me pose this as a question, and I want to see you type on option A, B, or C on the chat. And this is the poll that I want to share. So I want us to imagine for a second that we're organizing a training, and what our training was around designing metrics on how to measure people who work for us. So again, you're designing a training people on how to come up with good training metrics. Now you want to teach them the metric and the ability to distinguish what is a good metric as opposed to what is an effort. So with what you've learned from what I've just described around deconstructing a technical framework, right? From moving from the technical jargon to what it means. So I'm going to give you three options to choose from. So just put on the charts which option you think is the best way to deconstruct it, right? So I've got three options, and just pick an option, right? I want you to give me your option that you go for. I repeat again why you're thinking about the option, right? So you want to conduct a training, and what your training is focused on is how managers to understand the right metric for assessing their performance. Now, given what I've said, and you're training managers who don't understand what performance measurement means, what's the best way to make it relatable for them to understand? So, do you go with option A? Do you go with option B? Do you go with option C? Let's see what your take is. So I'm looking at the chat to see if I'm going to get a response. Okay, so Chinedu is going with option A. Um, yeah, Nenaya is going with option B. Ebere is going with option B. B, I'm seeing quite a lot of B's. I could give you at least 30 more seconds. Let's see. Tony is going with A. Onye is going with B. Hope is going with A. B. I see Ngozi going with B. I think I got about 10 seconds more, and I think the B's are having it. And I think that that in itself confirms that you all have a perfect understanding of how it works. And the correct answer really is B, right? So B is perfect, right? So you want to talk to people about it. So a visual that shows them, what it means between the difference between efforts and results, right? So having that photo of a treadmill, right, and the difference between that treadmill and the finish line, right? Then moving that to the hours worked, and then more importantly on why you should have a smart KPI. So that's really the point, really. And you can invert what I've just said, right? So you can also invert it as well too, right? So I think that's a perfect way to really understand that. And that's a fantastic way you've all expressed that you have a very good understanding. So I go back again to first things first, right? You always start by deconstructing the technical framework or the technical concept. Now, because I'm also speaking to you as trainers, so the delivery in terms of the deconstructing of the technical concept is just one part of the work, but there's also an overall experience you're trying to create. And one of the things you also do is to make sure that you are as light as possible in terms of the information. It's already one sort of fear to deal with, that we're coming to learn something technical. I use my example about teaching on tax, right? So it's bad enough that non-technical people are wondering, okay, what am I going to hear? Am I going to hear that I'm going to pay much on tax? Am I going to hear that the tax rate has been increased? So the second thing again to also do is to make sure that your slides or in terms of your delivery is quite very light in terms of content. It's also a mental thing as well to do, right? And so that's the next thing I'm going to be talking about, making sure that you avoid information overload. So let me speak a bit about avoiding information overload and the whole concept in reducing information overload in your training. Please feel free, and I really want this to be as interactive as possible. If you've got questions you want to ask, you could put your questions or raise your electronic hand. Okay. One of the things you tend to find is, and I see this a lot as someone who does a lot of what I call technical trainings as a finance trainer, is people think, if you're comprehensive, meaning if you're quite detailed or quite heavy in terms of the content, it's very common for me to see, I see people trying to do a training around something around, any aspect of finance, maybe a financial reporting class, right? And then I see quite a lot of slides. I actually saw one who came to present one day and he had over 200 slides, right? I had a conversation ultimately with a person just to speak to how that was something to manage for a next time. But I think it's a general mistake sometimes I see where people mistake comprehensiveness, being as comprehensive as possible to represent competence, right? And there are quite a lot of things sometimes that we could cloud our slides with. Now, it's tough enough to have that, to be honest, right? But I think that when we have what I call a technical training, you want to pay attention to those kind of things. Because in reality, what you then have is what I'll call a concept I'll call intellectual paralysis, right? Where there's so much going through the minds of the learner. And that's something you want to be very careful about. I'll tell you a thing about the brain and why this idea of reducing information overload is very important, and you should bear that in mind when you take technical concepts. So our human brain really has two distinct memory, and it's important that trainers, subject matter experts, we understand this. So one part of our brain is called the long-term memory, and this one has an infinite capacity, and that speaks to why there are many things you can always record that's happened to you. It's very common sometimes, and as part of what you do on a day-to-day basis, to record things that might have happened as 30 years ago, 40 years ago. I bet you that if I open up the room to get some of you speaking, some of you could share with me some experiences that happened to you 4 decades ago, 5 decades ago, right? Those kind of things. So there's that part of our brain that has the capacity, to do a lot and can store a lot of things in the long term. Now, what's also interesting again too is that another part of the brain is the working memory, and that's the fragile bit, right? Now, the way it works in training, and this is very important for trainers, is that when you train, it goes first from the working memory, which is the fragile part. that doesn't have the capacity to store a lot before it goes to the long-term memory. And that's the problem for training and delivering on training, that as the audience is listening to us, it has to first of all get it through them in terms of the working memory, the quite fragile one, before it then stores in the longer term memory. Now, that's the problem when you are delivering on something technical. Your job is to make sure that you allow the working memory, the quite fragile parts of the memory, accept the information, and such that that can then get stored in the longer term memory. And that's something to be very intentional about when you're delivering on a technical training, right? And so that's why the simple argument, and I think I can see somebody coming up with a point on the chat, which is the more slides you have, the simpler it become, right? So you want to make sure that you're very intentional about reducing. In fact, I would say avoid it as much as possible, right? One of the easier ways to do this might be to say substitute a lot of what you want to say with visuals. I think it allows you. But really what we are trying to do is to settle the mind and the brain to really be receptive about what is about to happen. Again, some state, and I'm going to share a lot of the insight reports where you can get a couple of this just to help. Now, what is also interesting is that the data also tells us that the working memory can only take about 4 to 5 blocks of new data at every moment in time. And that's why you find that you might get into a situation where you're quite doing something like a sort of training, and you might be speaking, and people might say, no, you're speaking too fast. It might actually not be that you're speaking too fast. What's actually happening is that you're passing quite a lot at the same time. And so you must be very intentional. And I repeat again that the human brain has two parts. There's the working memory and there's the long-term memory. And knowledge flows through from the working memory when it accepts it before it goes to the long-term memory. And so you have a duty to ensure that you are simple as you can be in the delivery so that it's accepted by the working memory and then it gets stored in the long-term memory. And that's why you have to be careful about throwing technical jargons when you speak so that you don't have this thing I call, like a log jam or information overload, right? So, and I'll tell you something. Most times our learner's brain actively stops trying to comprehend technical things as we continue to throw them. Many times, right, I see cases where before I even start, right, depending on how I even framed my topic, right? So for example, I teach a topic called financial instruments. And then people are listening and looking at me in the class and they can see something called financial instruments and they're wondering, what is this? What are they going to meet? So you've got to be very careful to, not just even in terms of the content or the loading on what you have in your messaging, but also too in your use of words, in your use of terminologies many times. So if you start with a lot of technical terms, even though it might be quite less in terms of the content, but just the art of using technical terminologies in itself too also makes the learner's brain pause and is wondering, okay, so what am I hearing? So what is this, right? It's almost like processing at the same time as I'm listening to you. So you've got to be very careful, about those things when you deliver on the technical training, right? And the point is that as learners, learners only tend to process few pieces of information at a time. So you must always bear this in mind, that learners process few pieces of information at a time. I have a rule I call the 48 hours rule when I'm delivering on a technical training, like what I do. My rule is that if I think that what I'm trying to drive at will not be relevant to the trainer in the next 48 hours, I will tend to strip it off the slide and put it as an attachment. So if I think they would not be able to apply what I'm saying to them over the next 48 hours, meaning the next 2 days, right? I tend to say, okay, that's a good kind of information to put as an attachment and attach it to the presentation that I'm making. So my point really is that when you're delivering on something technical, you've got to also, beyond interpreting what it means for them, you also have to find out if they really need that information at the point you are saying that, right? And so you want to focus on those things that they really, really, really have to know immediately. And if there are things they can always fall back on, that's a good candidate on what can go in to the attachment. So that's something that I want us to think about. So let me just pause again and just ask, is this clear so far? You could give me an emoji reaction if that is fine, or you could actually raise your hand to give me a live feedback. I'll be very happy to get that. Okay. Okay, I think quite a couple, and I'm seeing quite a couple of very experienced trainers as well on the call. Thank you for joining. All right.
Jonathan, and I also see some comments in chat, so
Oh,
I don't know if you want to
yeah.
address them.
Okay. That's perfect. That's perfect. I think very good, very good. I see Benga says worked examples with solutions helps a lot. Okay, I think Benga can relate with me. That's a finance trainer. So yeah. So sometimes you come with worked examples and solutions already, even before you start, right? It sort of douses the tension, right? Let's see another perspective. Nenaya says some learners are already apprehensive before you start. Yeah. And it's almost like the thing we say about a trainer also being a coach as well. So you have a duty to read the room, gauge the room, and be very intentional about the experience you want to create. It's ultimately at the end of the day, it's about an experience. And I'm going to get into that as the next stage after that. It's always about the experience. You've got to think with the end in mind, right? When you're designing these training experiences. Okay, thanks. And many thanks. And please keep them coming on the chat if you do. I'll be very happy to wrap up soon and open the floor to just get some live feedbacks. Okay, one of the things I think we must be very intentional about as well too is not to get into a technical training and let our learners do a lot of memorization. I see that a lot, right? So doing a lot of memorization, we must be intentional about. I think we should give them the key things they need. It's a good thing, and I find this a lot, and I'm sure that many of you might be able to relate with what I'm saying. That I think when you do a technical training, there has to be quite a lot of supporting documents that should go with it. And so the argument then becomes what should be in the supporting document vis-a-vis what should be on your slides, right? I'll say the key things are very important. I have it for the 8 hours rule. If we can't recall it after 48 hours, it should be on the PDF document that will be a supporting document. But I think that's something you have to be very intentional about. What are the things that I think they should be able to understand? I'm seeing on the chat, Adora is saying, that we must be able to determine what information is good for them to know and what can be shared with them. Perfectly, exactly so as well. Okay, so let me run this. And I'm going to just make you do this as a true or false. So I want you to do this for me on the chat. So just give me a true or false response. So imagine you want to teach a technical topic. I mean, I will just tax and forgive me for doing so because I teach finance a lot. So you want to teach a technical topic. Should you display the entire statutory tax table so that the learners can see the full content while you're talking? Should you display it? The whole table around all the tax rates. Do you want to display that on the slide so that they see it as you're speaking? What do you think? Should you do so? True or false? Okay. I see no, false, no, false, no. Funto Ngozi say no on appendix, no on appendix, false, false, false. Chinedu says yes. So I think there's one. Yeah, Gbenga says it will cause information overload. Again, something I'm happy about is I think the general view of the class in the previous poll and even with this current one reflects the answer, and that's actually correct, right? Again, avoid putting your learners in a situation where they are going to do a lot of memorization. You want to be very careful about that, right? So I think it's a beautiful thing. A whole table about the various tax rates could be a document to always make reference to, right? So I think that's a fantastic thing to have as a supporting document. You could speak to some of the critical tax rate they need to know, but I think that the entirety of the document, can be something that will be supporting. Thank you, Primrose. And I can see that you're also with the majority, and which is the correct answer. So thanks. All right, let's look at another poll. So let's say, for example, there's something you're training that involves you stating a legal subclause, uh, and you think that will not change the immediate decision of the learner within the next 48 hours. I guess I might have given the answer with this. Do you think it should be filtered off the presentation slide? So the point here is, if you have a presentation slide that contains something that the learner might not be able to make use of within a 48-hour period, do you think it's a good idea to still have them within your presentation slide? So just some thoughts, and I'll be very happy to know your thinking. All right, so maybe I should do something. I want to change this a bit more. Instead of just making this true or false, it might be nice to know the thinking around why we say no or why we say yes, right? So please, can you just raise your electronic hand? Anybody speaking, it would be nice to just, quite a lot of you, I know some of you on the call. So it might just be helpful to know what the thinking really is around the choice. So Gbenga says filter them out. Who is happy to just raise an electronic hand and let's get the thinking or the idea around your thinking? I think that might be very helpful. And Anna, let me know if there's a hand up that I can't see or I don't see. I mean, it would be great. So I think two hands are up. Fantastic. Are we able to help them? I
Yes,
see.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. I see a couple of hands. Adora, let's start with you. Adora, you have been unmuted. You have the mic.
Hello.
We can hear you.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Jonathan. Thanks, Anna. So yes, I think you had actually shared this earlier. The fact that the learners are not going to need to make use of the information within 48 hours definitely should be filtered out of the slides and then sent as a post read, an additional document. So it's a good to know, but it's not a must know for that particular presentation. Thank you.
All right. Great. Thank you so much.
Thank
And I think you were spot on in terms of the thinking around why you chose that. Benga, your hand is up. It would be nice to know what you're thinking.
Gbenga, you have the mic.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jonathan, for a great job. Why it should be filtered out is that it's not in their working memory. Such information, since they are not going to use it, might get to their working memory, but it's not going to get into the retentive part of their brain, like you mentioned earlier. And what does not get to the retentive part of the brain gets fizzled out. They will not use it. They will not be able to remember it. So there will be no learning. So, and once there is no learning, in fact, they might even forget that you ever mentioned anything like that. So it's better to filter it out of the slide. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think that the both of you are very clear on your rationale for that. And honestly, I couldn't agree any less with that point. I think that was well stated. Pato makes a point. He says, as we have mentioned, we should avoid having learners memorize things that they do not need to use right over the next couple of hours. Yeah, so that's a way to always manage the point on information overload. All right, I have another exercise. Reading the paragraphs on your slide word for word can actually help your non-technical learners absorb the information better because they are experiencing it both by sight and by sound simultaneously. Do you agree with that point? Meaning, do we read our slide word for word so that non-technical people can, flow with the session? So what's your take on that? Is that true or false? Is that a good approach or a wrong approach? Mm. Okay, I think some chats are coming up, and I'm just going to read them on the chat. What am I saying on the chat? So, wrong approach, it is distracting. It's a wrong approach. Adora says it is false. Yeah, meaning it's a wrong approach. All right. I think the generality of the room uh, agrees with that, and that's correct. Okay, so once again, my four-step flow diagram, deconstructing the technical concept, breaking it down into what it means for the learner is the right way to start. Also think about your delivery to make sure you're avoiding information overload. The next step is about making sure that your learning is now actionable. You want to make sure that if you're doing a technical training, it is actionable, meaning it is practical and that you're immersing them. The key thing is you're immersing them in trainings like this. So, what's the goal? The goal is a technical training is one where you want to get your learners moving from understanding to application. That's even the attraction behind why you want to train something technical. You want them to act on it really. And I think that the thing to really always be intentional about is how do I make the learner start to act with information that I'm sharing? How do I make them start to act? And that's where I'm going to then speak about these styles when it comes to learning, right? So we have what we call the deductive learning approach. Then we have the inductive learning approach. I say this again. There's the deductive learning approach. There's the inductive learning approach. I'll speak to what it means. Deductive learning approach is you start by explaining the theory, the rules, and the concepts, and then people then apply, which is typically what we find in terms of how we learn in school, rote academic learning. We are taught, and then you have to go and apply. But inductive is the other way around, where you try to make them simulate scenarios where people act, almost like you immerse people to act, and then based on what they've experienced, then the learning has then come true, right? So it's almost like inverting that process in itself. So there's an argument, and that's the argument that I'm making, right? To say, when we're delivering technical trainings, sometimes it helps to immerse people, to put them, and because it's quite technical, right? So you want to first of all get their perspective by allowing them to first of all, try out what does this mean for them, and then after that, you then get them to then understand what's the reality or what's the idea around what you had, right? So I call this immerse them, right? Immerse them. I think you should be doing a technical training by having a lot of what I call practical scenarios, right? Or using case examples or using case studies. I've never done a training that is around finance without having to do what I call a lot of case study examples, a lot. And sometimes I start before even we go into the technical things to learn by just giving them some topics or some examples to try out and say, okay, so what would you do? And many times it raises what I call curiosity, right? So they first of all put their hands dirty and just try to see what they understand. After giving them an exercise, then I then get to explain to them what was the idea around those exercises that I shared with them, and how those exercises in itself, right, then feeds into the core learning for today. So the point is to make it actionable for them, right? To make it actionable for them, and then forcing them on how to really understand, what is the theoretical element around what it is that they've just done, right? So that's something. So I flip it sometimes, and the idea is just to make sure that learning is action based rather than something that is theoretical. So again, there can be hybrids around this, but my point is any technical training must have a practical component. That's where I'm going to. So the order in which you want to start could differ, right? You want to start by giving them a small exercise when you start to break things a bit simple, or to have immersed them from the onset. It could also be that you must make sure that somewhere before the completion of the training that they do a practical application of what has been taught. So my point is, delivering on technical trainings must have an application-based sort of content around it, right? There must be the opportunity for them to apply, and that's the way it's going to stick, all through the entirety of the session, right? So that's the points that I wanted to make around that. Okay, let's go to the final step, right? So the first step was to deconstruct the technical concepts. The second step was to make sure that they avoid information overload in your delivery. The third step is to make sure that there is a practical application in terms of what they're going to be learning as part of the training. And then the final part is to think about the overall experience, anchoring your message, right? To make sure that you've created what I'll call a memorable experience ultimately at the end of the day, right? So deconstruct the technical framework, filter out the noise by making sure there's a lot of information that is unnecessary on your presentation to be out of it. It could be sent as an attachment. Make sure that they have immersed themselves into it. It must be application based, and then much more finally think about the overall experience, and that's where you anchor your message. So make the overall experience a memorable one, right? And that's where you're now thinking about, how do I make sure that the long-term memory is where all of this has moved away now from the short-term memory, right? So that's the thing to really think about. Now, what does this mean, right? And I say this because if a learner cannot recall what was taught, I think that training has failed. The whole goal around the training, much more technical training, is that the learner should be able to recall what was taught. A way to make sure that you factor this in terms of the overall experience being memorable, is to always recall that the brain is very good at retaining things that are simplified. I've said so. The brain is very good in making sure that it retains things that it can emotionally connect with or contextually, relate to it. Things that are repeated, right? So one of the things that we must be very intentional about in terms of this overall training experience is to make sure that we look for recognizable anchors, right? Those things that allows us pass the messaging, right? Those recognizable anchors. I don't think a generic training or a technical training should have generic comments like Have you got a question for me? Any question? I think we should probe the questions in itself. Generic terminologies or generic questions shouldn't work when it's a technical training, right? Remember I spoke about anchors, right? Using words that allows you to constantly make sure that the messaging is being passed, right? And sometimes if that means that you can always come up with a framework. So I'm going to share with you a framework that I like to say, okay, what have you learned, right? I want to know what you've learned. Has this been impactful? That's a good way. So you're forcing them to actually think, and what would you do next time, right? So instead of wrapping up a generic, your technical training with questions like, have you got a question for me? Probe the question or elicit the question, right? By saying, what have you learned and what would you do differently? I like those kind of phrases, right? And then what you're doing is you're getting the learner to start to think, okay, now if it wasn't right in the subconscious, now it's going to the subconscious, right? So almost like flushing it out now, wherever it was stuck now to the subconscious. So I think that's something. So I would say that in terms of making sure that the learning experience is memorable when it's a technical training, your cues, your anchors, your questioning styles too should be reflected. So I want to see things like, what have you learned being asked over and over? What does it mean for you? Terminologies like that or cues like that. What are you going to do next? Those kind of terminologies that shows we are walking away from this session with an action plan in mind. What would you do differently? What are you going to commit to over the next 5 days? What are you going to commit to over the next 7 days? What are you going to stop that you've always been doing? I think those kind of anchors are very important when you're doing a technical training. And what we are trying to achieve is to make sure that, we're creating an experience where what they've learned will stay and will get stuck. That's the whole idea around that. So I think those phrasing, those messaging words, those anchors, I think you've got to think about it. I like the idea of this what. So what about it? And so what are you going to do next? Now, what you have now got from this, how will it be applied? We could get into different hierarchies of how those terminologies are. But I'm saying don't leave it as generic statements, right? Make sure it is probing. So there's the point about probing questions a lot. So when you're doing trainings like this, you should probe, you should elicit thinking really on the part of the learner. So this is the point where I'm going to ask if this was clear, or could there be any room for me to sort of provide more illustration to what I've just shared? Has this been clear so far? Okay. All right. So Chinedu is spot on. I can see quite a couple of emojis in itself. All right. Okay. Let's have one exercise, right? Again, just give me your answer, true or false, yes or no. I think that's fine. So let's say we have a technical training session that has been considered very successful and the learners were excited. They have actively participated. In fact, they gave the trainer a score of 10 out of 10, right? Even though the trainer skipped offering a debrief at the end of the day, would you say that that was well executed or not? Do you agree that this was a well executed training? Again, it was very interactive. The learners were excited, but there was a critical part that was skipped, which was the part around doing a final review. Would you consider that a very successful technical training? That's a point I want to ask. So true or false, would you consider that? And I'll be very happy if there's any illustration on the point. Okay. Who is happy to just speak to why you're taking the position false or not? I'm seeing quite a lot of people. So Tony is speaking. It would be very nice to just get your feedback. So Pelumi says false. Review is key to understanding because that gives you the okay. Please go on.
Jonathan, I'm going to unmute Toyin. Toyin has raised
Yeah.
hand. Okay, his hand. Okay. Wait, sorry. Press the wrong button.
That's okay.
Hello?
Toyin, you have the floor. Yes.
Okay, great. So I was just going to say that
Oops. Sorry. Toyin, I apologize. We just lost you. If you can please just raise your hand one more time. Thank you so much.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, thank you.
Okay, I was just saying that to Dr. Jonathan that I actually believe debrief is a key part of any training, whether it's technical or not. And I feel like I use the what, so what, now what as part of my debriefing because I believe that methodology helps to
Yeah.
really get people to think through what exactly did they learn. So it kind of covers everything. Like, I want you to tell me what you got out of today. What did it? What difference did it make for you? And
Yeah.
now, how are you going to continue to apply it
Yeah.
in your work or as you move forward? So for me, those are that's very important. Even if I get 10 out of 10, if I can't do a debrief, then I've really missed a key piece of
Yeah.
the training experience. Thank you.
Fantastic, Tony. I couldn't, think you any further from the truth. I mean, that was spot on, because that's a key component of reconfirming, learning has actually taken place. And so I see this a lot, and that's the reason why I wanted to use this as an exercise. Apologies, I didn't make it like a real poll where you had to click. But again, the point really is where you do have technical trainings. I think that it's important to understand that your ability to gauge the technical trainings in terms of what they take out of the training and what they can then do next, right? So even if there's a lot of excitement around the training, even if there's a lot of feedback that says it was fine, the real success of a technical training is how then they're well capacitated to then carry out those technical things. And that's really the point to always put at the back of your mind as well. Again. All right. Okay, so let's sort of wrap this up now. I think that technical trainings will always be a part of the entire training value chain that you find. Many things that requires that we build capacity around might not be things that the learners might be familiar around. There's quite a lot that a learner wants to learn that it's something that they might never have any idea around. And sometimes those things could be complex, could be abstract really as at that stage, and could be technical. And that's the point why we must be very intentional that when it's a technical training, we're not just doing what I call data dumping, right? But we must be very intentional about the overall experience that we want the learners to have out of it. I've shared a 4-step framework, deconstruct the technical terms and sort of land on what does it mean for the learner. The other thing is avoid information overload and make sure that it is something that it's immersive and actionable, and then make sure that your cues, your messaging, your anchors also allows you to be able to probe if that learning is actually as memorable as it has been designed to do so. Again, make sure that your slides are quite very lean. So I think we've learned a couple of these things. All I'm just going to say as very super trainers is let's now go and implement them. Okay, what are we going to do? Next will be to ask you what are your key takeaways from this training. That's the question I have. So what are your key takeaways from the training? And honestly, I'll be very happy to hear from somebody who hasn't said a word today or responded today. I see a couple of things on the chat. Who wants to share with us what you've learned today? That would be very helpful. I see a couple of comments on the chat. I think that could have been a reference to your last question. Being excited about a joke. Feedback is very important. There's a hand up. I don't know if that's an old hand, electronic hand that is up. So what have we learned and what are we going to do differently?
I I see that Obasi has raised the hand, and I don't remember if Toyin lowered her hand or not, or if it's just from
Okay,
previous
all right,
time.
that's
But
fine.
let me unmute Obasi first. Okay,
Okay.
all right. Obasi, the floor is yours.
So what I've learned so far is I'm just going to make it very short. say, make sure the learners understand what you mean at every given point in time. Number two, try to be comprehensive as possible. Don't don't make sure there's an information overload. Then the third one, working memory differs from long-term memory. So you would want to make sure your learner has the information in their long-term memory, meaning you have to break things down and make sure things are as very practical as possible. Then the final one, make sure there's always a review. You always review anytime you have to, give a talk or you're in a training session. Make sure you ask for review and feedback so you would know if this information was properly passed. Yes, thank you very much. That's what I understood.
Thank you. Thank you, Basi. And I think you are very, very spot on. Thank you. Would there be any other person happy to share with us key takeaway? Okay, so I think we've got Hope.
I see some comments. Okay, yes, Hope. Okay, Hope, you have been unmuted.
Overload, because there is a temptation of getting so much information because information is now easily accessible and available. So yeah, so that was key to be, I think I'm taking out that almost as if to say precision in what we put in our presentation is very important. If it's not going to benefit our client, take it out.
Yeah.
And I like what Doc said, to say, if it's not needed at the moment, put it as an attachment. You don't have to just put it in front there because it will distract attention. So that was my key learning. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm happy. I mean, that's, you sort of see it from that perspective, which is actually very good for you. Also in terms of gauging how effective our trainings can be. All right. Could there be an opportunity for one more person or
Yes.
so? A couple? Yeah.
Raymond, I'm about to unmute you. Okay. Raymond, can you hear us? Hello?
The variation, not only in the slides, but tone of voice and everything else, to kind of keep the interest, because so often with presenter slides, they tend to, each one follows on the other and they practically all look the same. Whereas if you start throwing in imagery, start changing stuff, bringing in video clips, it changes the whole thing.
Yeah.
Just an opinion from you?
That's true. That's true. I think I didn't hear you, but I heard you make the point around, going with a lot of visuals. Was that what you're saying? That using a lot of visuals?
Visuals, pictures, but also
Yeah.
changing the imagery.
Yeah.
Having lots of variation.
That's true. Yeah, I made the point actually that that's actually a way to keep to deal with information overload, lesser text and more a lot around imagery, videos, and those things excite. I think it's exciting for the brain. It's exciting also for our sensory organs like the eyes in itself too. Looking at these different things, right, in itself, right. So yeah, those things are very important, and also in terms of stimulating the learner, and also in terms of expectation. What do I then expect next, right? So we've got different types of learners with different kind of learning styles, right? So I think it's a way to keep them engaged in itself. Thanks, and that's a very good point, by the way.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. So there's quite a lot in terms of how we deal with complex learning. And if you'll be interested in reading a bit about it, I've shared this as well, so you can go through some of them and just look at how, learning can be demystified, especially where you want to start using interactive tools, multimedia tools, using different approaches, inductive learning approaches, and learning methodologies in itself. Quite a couple of reading materials. There's quite a lot happening today now with fusing things around artificial intelligence, fusing things around gamification and learning in itself that can make technical things quite relatable to a learner. I think technology is playing a critical role. Someone did make a point about storytelling, right? Doing a lot of storytelling, a lot of examples, simulation-based learnings. I think these are things that makes technical content quite very easy, and relatable on the part of non-technical people to really grasp what we're doing. And I think that as the world continues to evolve in terms of learning styles, learning approaches, technology can play a critical role. Also in terms of inclusion as well too, right? We also have to be very intentional that we're learning again to is also including, groups that typically have been excluded. And I think that infusing various learning styles and also infusing technology can cater to some of the previously excluded groups. Thank you for participating in the webinar. I'm happy that I had the opportunity to share this. It's like an outcome of a research work that I've been looking at, and I want to thank Anna and Julia for just giving me the opportunity to be able to share my experience around delivering technical trainings with the community. It's something I'm really very grateful for. Thank you so much.
Well, Dr. Jonathan Ikeolumba, the pleasure is ours, obviously. So thank you so much for sharing your insights, from the research, and we actually look forward to learning more from you in the future. I know that you have been thinking about delivering more webinars. Obviously, have so much to share. So thank you so much. We appreciate that. Dear participants, we would be grateful if you could please share your feedback on today's session, whether the pace was right for you, whether it was informative enough, whether you think you would be able to take away and implement what you learned in today's webinar. So if you could just answer some of the questions in SurveyMonkey, that would be fantastic. So thank you all and have a wonderful day. And I will stay online for just a couple of minutes in case you have any questions. I don't know, about the GLC program, about the master trainer program, about any future events, about how to how to be a presenter on GLC. So anything at all you would like to ask us, we would be happy to stay and answer your questions. Jonathan, I actually see that. Oh, maybe I'm wrong. Pato raised his hand. I'm not sure if there was a question or a comment. Do you want to unmute the
I'm
mic?
also happy to wait behind as well too.
Okay. Yes, thank you, double Dr. Jonathan. That's correct. Pato, if you're still there, I don't know if you have a question or perhaps it was a comment to the previous discussion. We're still happy to talk to you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, because I think you didn't see my hand. So that's maybe why, but it's okay. First of all, I wanted to congratulate the presenter. It was a very straight presentation and everything was clear. And I really want to say that and thank him and congratulate him and hope to see him for another session.
Thank you so much.
And for a takeaway, I would say that what I've learned from the overall presentation is before we get into a presentation that is technical, very technical, we need to know first what do we need our learners to know and take away right away that they could use in the next couple of hours or couple of days. Then if we know that, that's when now we should consider the step flow diagram that has been presented. The 4 steps are very important. And I think if we get all of that, we are good to go. And now I wanted to ask a question regarding the top presenter, top master trainer application. And there is a question there. It was not clear that I had a good understanding. It was about uploading or sending diplomas and but they talked also about over the 5 last years. Does it mean we only need to upload our diplomas that we got within the 5 last years, or we have to upload any diploma we had so far?
Thank you so much first of all, Pato, for your comment. and for wrapping up the session. And to answer your question about the master training application, you can send whatever diplomas you have. So if you have like a bachelor's degree, master's degree, please share those diplomas. But when it comes to certificates, we understand that many of you have lots of experience, and probably over the course of, I don't know, 15, 20, 30 years, you have accumulated so many certificates. We don't need all of them. We'll probably just need, the most relevant ones and perhaps the most recent certificates. But if you're in doubt, feel free to send us whatever you have, and I guess we'll just sort it out.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you very much. That's
Of
clear.
course, thank you.
Sure.
Anything else? Any more comments, questions? Well, I'm pretty sure
There's a
that,
hand up. There's
yes.
Tambu. There's a hand up,
Yeah.
Tambu.
Okay. Tambu, you have been unmuted.
Much, Dr. Jonathan. My name is Tambundoro. I'm actually new to the network, and I really appreciate the informative session. I must apologize. I was 13 minutes late, so I'm getting to see that I'm missing a little bit of the information that was discussed earlier with regards to, I suppose, submitting certificates and application. So Anna, if you don't mind, if you can just share with me just 2 minutes in terms of what I missed out in the introductory section, and how do we become submit our applications. Thank you.
First of all, Dr. Jonathan, do you give me permission to upload the presentation that you shared with me on the website? Like for those.
Sure. That's
Okay.
fine.
Okay, so since you missed the first 30 minutes, we will first of all upload the presentation on the website, and we will also share the recording. So if you would like, you can actually catch up on the discussion. But as far as the announcements are concerned, basically what I was saying is that currently we accept applications for the master trainer in facilitating learning certification program, and the deadline is actually June 1st. So it's just in a couple of days from now. Monday is the deadline. I just posted in chat the link to the description of that program, the master trainer program. So if you would like, you can apply now. If not, if you don't think, you can collect all the documents and apply in the next few days, I'm pretty sure that we would have another master training certification program offered, perhaps not the next year, not next year, but maybe in a couple of years from now. So since you're new to the Rolling Connect community, we would be happy to welcome you and avail, all the resources that we have, share them with you so that you will be fully prepared to apply next time if you can't apply, by June 1st. Okay. So once again, I just posted the link in chat. That's the link to the Master Trainer Certification Program. And Jonathan, actually, our presenter and double doctor, he is the Master Trainer, as we all know. So he has gone through this process how many years ago? 4 years ago?
2022, that was 4 years
2022,
ago.
yes, yeah, 4 years ago. So if you have any questions about the process or how does it, or how it feels to be a master trainer, actually, you can talk to him, perhaps. So let us know. And maybe for those of you who are not familiar, so a master trainer specifically is someone who has lots of experience and who has been properly trained and authorized, licensed to train other trainers. So they're not just delivering training in finance, for example, or tax administration, but they're actually training other trainers, right? So we expect them to be really leaders in their field. We expect them to be highly, experienced, have coaching experience or any other kind of experience that will help them to effectively train other trainers. So that's what the program is about. Okay. Any other questions, comments?
I think Twin's hand is up. I don't know if it's an old one.
Let's see. Michael,
It's
I think
Michael.
Michael, yeah. Michael, I'm going to unmute you. Okay. Michael, you have been unmuted. The floor is yours.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. I think it was a very wonderful session that we have today. I was very interested. And also likewise, like my friends that have previously spoken, I was also joined a few minutes later, but all the what I have was very important. And as part of this training session, I do have so many things to take away from this. And I want to say thank you for the presenter. One question that I want to have is about the master trader application. I have a master trader application. I have applied through the process, and also I did get a confirmation about the sending of my certificates, and also I think one of the referees have also sent their references. But I also got my second reference person have also confirmed that they have sent their reference, but so far I didn't get confirmation from your side. So do I have to worry about that is one of my question. But they have said that they have already got the confirmation that you have received the mail. And another thing that I think probably the form have been very long, and we have provided so many informations. So if you can review it early, and if there are some things that have to be corrected, can you give us as early as possible the comment or anything that would be missed in case in the form? That's for what I have. Thank you very much.
Michael, I believe so. Your full name is Michael Gobezi Mesfin. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, you're all set. Your application is complete. We received all the reference letters. If you like, I can share with you your application if you just want to keep it for, I don't know, for your records.
Thank you very much. That will be fine.
But yeah, I think you're good to go. So all the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
All right. Any other questions, comments? If you have specifically questions about the Master Training Certification Program, I'm going to, okay, grow learn.
Someone has put on the chat. I think Twin says she has.
Yeah, so I'm providing you with an email address. That's sort of the generic email address that you can reach us at. Let me see. I think there are some comments. Awesome sessions. Thank you. Definitely will reach out. Okay, so Tambu says, my background is ESG, okay, climate change and financial literacy. I also facilitate and coach entrepreneurs and women founders in the idea stage, prototype, and early established phase of their business. Okay, that's so super. That's interesting. Yeah, I have one. Okay, all right. Sounds good. Sounds good. So it seems like we have some colleagues, yours, right, Jonathan? Climate change and ESG. Okay, cool. Wonderful. So if there are no more comments, then I believe we can wrap up today's session. So I would like to once again thank all of you, thank all the participants for comments, questions, for spending this hour and a half with us, and of course, Dr. Jonathan Ikeolumba. Really appreciate your time and energy and your vast knowledge. So thank you so much for sharing it with us.
Thank you as well. Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.